Welcome to Inside the Circle, Creating Resilient Systems. I'm Kate Cooper, founder of Inner Circle Mental Health, and I'm joined by my co-host, Autumn Cooper, who is the co-founder and director of Inner Circle Institute.
This podcast exists because we've seen something over and over again. Good people, capable, committed, high-performing people, burning out inside systems that were never designed to hold the weight they carry. And too often we respond by telling individuals to just cope better.
In this first real episode, we're asking a different question. What if burnout isn't a personal failure? What if it is a structural issue?
Today we're talking to three groups. To the people inside these systems who feel unseen, to the leaders who genuinely want to help out but don't know how, and to the clients who need to know we are not just treating symptoms, we are advocating for systems change.
This conversation isn't about blame, it's about design, responsibility, and what actually creates resilience in high exposure environments. So let's start with this. Why do good people burn out in good systems? So I feel like it's just important to start off with I named this episode why good people burn out in good systems, and you immediately balked at that, and I want to know your thoughts.
Well, I think there's a structural component. What are the good systems? Mm-hmm. What makes a good system? And I think I balked at it a little bit because in our work and doing some of the discovery calls that we've done, I haven't stumbled across a good system yet of people who are really doing it well.
Yeah.
There are places yesterday, even just talking, where somebody was like, this part is really good, but the system overall is really challenging. Yeah. So I think I balked at good systems.
There are no good systems.
Where are they? And I know they exist, right?
Yeah.
There are places that have had some important work done. They have, people coming in and doing kind of the work that we're doing. So I know it exists.
Yeah.
I just haven't really stumbled across one yet.
Well, and I think...
Well, we're a good system.
We're a good system. I think that where it kind of lands for me, because when you brought that up, the second I saw your face, I was like, what is a good system? And I think that we work so much in people and we work so much in relationships that, to me, when I think of what is a good system, I'm thinking about a system that has people who genuinely care about the work that they're doing, and those people are the things holding the system together and holding those departments together. And without those people, those systems would absolutely crumble immediately. And what little help there is right now just wouldn't exist anymore. And so I think that's more of where I was going with it, was that there are good people who need help in these systems.
I totally agree. There are people in systems that are every day navigating really hard things. So good people inside of really hard systems. And I'm not saying systems are broken, right? Because I think we've had that conversation before, where I don't think things are broken. I think things can just always benefit from a little extra support and guidance, and obviously what the research says about how to make it better. So absolutely, good teams, good people exist in most systems. Yeah. And maybe that's what makes the system good, is the good people. But I think good people in systems where the system is really challenged or stressed or overwhelmed or doesn't have some of those support pillars in place, that's the ultimate root of why people burn out, right? Yeah. Because the weight becomes so much to carry inside that system. There's, besides burnout, there's a phenomenon called cracking in. And
what is cracking in?
So cracking in is it's a little bit different than quiet quitting, which, quiet quitting is when people show up, they're a warm body in their seat. They maybe do the minimal at their job, but they're still showing up. Well, cracking in is a little bit different, and it's people who really love their jobs, who show up every day to do big, important work, but inside they're cracking because the system doesn't support them.
They're holding the system.
They're holding the system, so they're cracking, kind of like a foundation, right?
It's like an umbrella. They're holding it from their people. They're protecting their people.
But underneath the umbrella, they're getting wet, and nobody's saying, here's a towel at the systems level.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons systems lose some of their strongest employees sometimes, or what makes people who really love their job, who really love the place where they work, leave their work because they have just crumbled underneath the umbrella, but they keep holding it over everybody else.
Yeah.
And on the inside, they're cracking in. So I think that that's an important phenomenon that we're not really talking about as much as burnout, and as much as kind of the secondary trauma and compassion fatigue, quiet quitting. I think cracking in is costing a lot of organizations some of their strongest people.
Yeah, I think that we work so much inside first responder systems, and I think it's important to clarify that, like, we consider responder systems to be a much broader lens than basically everybody else does. And I wish that people would recognize that first responder umbrella is so much larger than what the general public thinks it is, because they think like that's a firefighter, that's a cop, that's somebody who's on an ambulance, right? Like, to the general public, that is what a first responder is.
Right.
But really, a first responder is a helper. Right?
Helpers and holders of hard things and healing people.
Yes. And so that on its own encompasses just a huge range.
Right. Any people-serving organization.
Yeah.
You are on the front lines.
Yep.
And being on the front lines means you're first to respond.
Yeah.
That makes you a first responder.
And these are the systems that we are seeing crack. These are the systems that are cracking people. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is the entire point of this conversation, is how do we build resilience in this area? How do we drive change? How do we make people feel like they are less alone when they are the people in those systems? And it feels like such a big topic.
It's a huge topic.
So where do we start?
Well, where we start is just really getting in at the ground level and listening to what people in that organization are experiencing in their day-to-day lives at work, and really listening and holding some sessions where we can really dig into what their day-to-day work looks like, where systems might be letting them down, where their systems are doing really well and they want to see that continue. I think just tuning in and listening. Somebody one time asked me, like, if you could change anything about the workplace right now, what would it be? And I said, a place to give anonymous feedback. And they said, oh, well, we do annual surveys. And I said, well, it's tied to your IP address that is not anonymous. No, but it is confidential. And I said, well, there's a big difference, right? And so starting a place where people can give feedback that's not going to go to the leaders first.
Yeah.
Because people are going to control what they say out of fear.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if you're in a small organization and you're like one of 3 women in this age bracket in this county, like, it's going to be pretty hard to figure out who you are. And if you have criticisms, how is that information going to be dealt with?
Yeah.
And so, for us, it starts with a scan. What's your day-to-day like? Where is it working? Where is it not working? What do you need to continue to show up well at your work, to prevent burnout, to prevent quiet quitting, to prevent cracking in, to prevent secondary trauma and compassion fatigue, and all of the things that is at the heart of what we're doing at Inner Circle?
It seems like when we go into a new organization or a new department, we always lead with the first step in us coming to help train you guys is we build with and not for, and therefore we have to know what we're getting into, and we always start with that deep culture dive. You call it something, I forget what you call it, but it's the first 3 months or so that we're working with a new agency where we're doing those anonymous surveys, and we're compiling interviews, and we are talking to the people who are actually doing the work, because their voices are the ones that are not being heard. And leadership always feels very resistant to us doing that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I've seen a mix. Even in a discovery call this week, the leader was so excited to hear anonymous feedback.
Oh, I love
She
that.
was so excited about knowing what people were really experiencing in their day-to-day. So when that happens, I'm like, oh, wow, you are really ready for some of that transformation. Yeah. I think, as a leader, hearing hard feedback can be really overwhelming because most leaders, when they hear it, also have leaders right?
Yeah.
So we've got those senior leaders and those executive leaders, and even executive leaders have executive leaders and leaders above them and outside of the system in so many systems, right? Especially tax-paying systems.
Yes, they do.
And your ego takes a hit, right? And a lot of people in those high-level leadership positions got there by doing what they did the way they did it. And so having anyone kind of balk or push up against that can be really overwhelming. I mean, I can take a Freudian approach to it and say the ego is bruised.
Yeah.
And nobody likes their ego to be bruised. And I think if you're willing to operate from the value system of iron sharpens iron, which is such a responder mentality, what we're doing is saying, you know, this is sharp here, but like, let's make it sharper.
Yeah.
And we can do that. And it takes being vulnerable. But my favorite thing about vulnerability is that vulnerability comes after you express yourself, not before. Like you have to just go ahead and do it and put yourself in that vulnerable position, because that's what builds trust with the people that you're leading.
Yeah.
Versus just expecting them to trust you until they become vulnerable. We talk so much about parallel process. You probably get tired of hearing me say parallel process. Parallel process is this idea that's what's happening inside the individual is parallel to what's happening inside the system. So if you've got a bunch of burnout employees, we might imagine that the system's burned out. If you've got a system where people are able to talk about anything at team meetings and the leader really hears and listens to that, then they learn that that I matter, right? And I there's something that's stuck in my mind from meeting with my dissertation group, and she said, one of my chairs said, so much of the research focuses on the individual, but not enough people are really looking at the system and how the system is helping people feel better or making those people, feel worse or not, or experience those things that we're talking about, these phenomenon that we're trying to address. No one's really looking at that systems approach. I don't think that happens very well. I mean, there's people who are consistent about like, what do we do as far as branding goes?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But are you living those values?
Yeah.
Right? Are you really showing up in that way? Say we have the value of advocacy.
Yeah.
We can look at each other, Kate.
Yes.
And we can say, this is how we advocate.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's really what defines a system, is having those values. So,
and living those values.
And living those, which is so difficult. So just to give the viewers a background on this, Autumn came to me several months ago, and one of the first things that she did was say, I need to work from values. I need this values framework. And we were kind of exploring. I was like, well, this is what Inner Circle is about, and this is what we do here. And she literally read everything that I said, and she goes, oh, it almost spells circle. And I was like, okay. And then the next thing you know is she had lined out what we call our A circle values. And I always forget what all of them are, but they're posted on our front door. And they do genuinely guide how we work every single day. And I'll pull them up and I'll start reading them. But like the A stands for advocacy. And that is how we stand up for other people. And this can be reflected through how we manage people, how we treat our clients, how we treat the people that are working in the field. Like all of this reflects back to the A circle values that you created. And that is such like a tremendous part of systems work, I think. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yeah, it's not just supposed to be a tagline on your webpage.
No.
It's supposed to be how you show up. I mean, even in disciplining staff, the whole discipline system is built around these values.
Yeah.
And we're really asking those questions. How are you advocating for clients in this role? How are you showing up every day as an advocate?
And that is hard. It is hard to take those values because we all have ways that we are unhealed, like
They're
we
parts
all
of us.
There are all parts of us that no matter how much we work on them, like those unhealed parts really want to show up in certain situations. And having the humility to go back and look at those values that were created and that we agreed to and that we abide by, and saying, am I, as the leader, showing up in this way?
Right.
And even when I don't want to, even when I have
especially
a whole part
when
of
you
me,
don't want to.
Oh my gosh. When I have an entire part of me that is screaming to do things a different way, looking at those values brings it back in. So maybe it's an ego thing. For me, it's an ego thing.
I think it's mostly an ego thing for most people.
Yeah.
And, the brain, when our egos get bruised, one of the ways that our lower brain responds to that, this little pesky glands that keep us alive called the amygdala, one of the things that they do is not just fight or flight. One of the things that it also does is a cling response. And what do we cling to? Our ego. It's too much to confront that maybe I'm not living this value well.
Yeah.
But strong leaders do that. They craft the capacity and build out the skill set to say iron sharpens iron. That means we ask for feedback, and even the tough feedback, we say, okay, there probably is some truth to that, because people don't say those things out loud if they're not experiencing them, or they don't put them on a form when we request it. And I mean, even hearing from clients and getting direct feedback from clients consistently in session. A lot of therapists, that's a very vulnerable space to be, but our therapists are encouraged to do that very regularly. Like, how am I showing up for you well? Am I advocating for you well? Back to that one value that we both can anchor to this morning. How am I advocating for you? Am I making sure that you have everything that you need to show back up at work and do well? One of our values obviously is resilience. Am I strengthening your resilience? Am I helping you strengthen that capacity to maneuver hard things well and to bounce back from it when you fall in the middle of this experience? Like, do we give you those tools that you need to be able to navigate hard things well, which is essentially resilience? And so, living our values is critical. So when we show up at places, we ask, how are they living this value? When we do that environmental scan, how is your leadership living this value? And it's a hard question to ask, but I think it's a critical question to ask, especially if you're trying your best to show up well as an organization. And I think most organizations are doing their best.
I think they have intentions. I think that by the time we get invited into their system, they're not having a great time.
Right. Well, intention is invisible.
Yeah.
Right? We want to be a place people come to work and are happy.
Yeah.
Well, impact is different than intention, right? Like, I might have the intention to give you some hard feedback as a partner, right? And my intention is to share with you my heart. But the impact might be like, ouch, like, I don't like that. Like, keep that to yourself.
That was terrible and did not make me feel like I wanted to work here.
Right. And your ego is bruised. And then it, can cause a rupture in our relationship.
Yeah.
And the problem is rarely the rupture. And I think that that's one of the things that organizations struggle with, is once there's a rupture, it's on the employee to navigate that well. And we live this model of rupture and repair and recalibrate, right? So there's going to be a place, even with us, one day, there might be a rupture in our relationship, and we're going to need to name that. And then we're going to say, what do we need to do? Make an apology, or say, man, my intention was this, but my impact was this, and I'm really sorry. And then we say, what do we do different moving forward? Like, how do we do it differently moving forward so that we both can grow from it?
Yeah.
And, I think avoidance is a big defense mechanism that lives in most organizations and most people in organizations.
I think that if we're talking like between you and I think that avoidance is like our top. I love to avoid hard topics. And as a leader, I was talking with you a couple weeks ago, and we had a leadership meeting. And in that meeting, I had this realization that I was actually leading a bunch of people. And because in my brain, I feel very collaborative. Like, I don't ever feel like
hierarchical.
I don't feel like it's a hierarchy. And I had to step back, and I had to recognize and have the humility to recognize that is not how everybody else is viewing it, and that I do have a responsibility to be a better leader to people who view me as their leader, you know?
I think we all have that responsibility,
But
regardless of where you are on the org chart.
Well, exactly. And I think that it's hard. And if it's hard for me in this like entrepreneurial journey, how is it not also very hard for people that are working in department systems and working in nonprofit systems and working in state systems? Like, I'm over here building a thing, and I have the best intentions with my thing. But if even I cannot recognize that I need to be a better leader sometimes, like, how is there hope for other leaders to be resilient if somebody is not coming up to them and saying, hey, you need to listen to your people. Hey, I know that this is hard to hear. I know that you don't want to hear the feedback because you take this so personally. Look at all of the things that you've done. I don't believe that there is a single leader who got into their position with bad intentions.
No.
Nobody does that. Nobody says, I'm going to join this organization to ruin the days of every single person underneath me.
Absolutely not.
So keeping that kind of viewpoint in mind, like, where do we start? How do we change the conversation from, oh, I don't know if I want to hear that feedback, to, well, your system needs you to hear that feedback. Your people who are good people, who want to work here, who want to make a difference, who are drawn to your mission, how they need this. They need your help. So how do we tell leaders this?
I think we tell leaders that there's way more risk in staying in doing the same thing that you've always done than there ever will be in opening yourself up to this space of vulnerability. But we've got to honor and normalize the risk that comes along with vulnerability. But again, back to what I was saying about vulnerability, if you move into vulnerability, if you say, I need to hear this really hard feedback, and then you take that to heart and you share that you've heard this feedback and you're doing something about it, if that's adjusting a process or adjusting a policy or instituting a policy, I think that that's one of the ways that we kind of maneuver through that. We have to normalize the risk that comes along with vulnerability.
Yeah.
And then also highlight the benefit of vulnerability, which is trust. And only if people trust you as their leaders are they going to be able to come to you with these really hard things, right? One of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who said it, and I'm really sorry about that, but that authority without relationship is control.
That is so awful and good. That is so awfully good.
Yes, awfully good, right? And a lot of people, especially in hierarchical systems, and I see that too, and maybe I'm jumping in a tangent here, but I see a lot of hierarchical systems have non-hierarchical values, right?
Yeah.
Accountability being one of those values that we hear, kind of like, we're accountable. And that accountability, that accountability tends to run from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
You're accountable up. But what is, in a true safe system, even hierarchical, accountability can be bidirectional.
Yeah. And should be.
I don't like to should on people, but I think absolutely it's critical to be able to name it in that way. And so, and that's even if that's not your value. If your person has a personal value, if it's not an organizational value, and you believe so much in accountability, it's not just expecting people to report well to you, it's you reporting well to people.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, think about that in a family system. Yeah. You want your children to be responsible and accountable. I don't know a single parent who doesn't value accountability for their children. But I'll ask the question, when somebody says, oh, they're not being accountable. My first question is, isn't like, oh, what are they not doing to be accountable? I'll say, how do you show up as accountable? Where are they getting the template for accountability? It hurts. Oh. It hurts. But I think, right, like that's...
I think as a parent, I would be like, what? Nobody has ever asked me to justify my accountability to my child.
Right. But where do children get their templates for navigating big things? Always from their grown-ups or trusted people outside of their family, right? And so we have somebody who can model that well, even if it's not your grown-up, but a grown-up models it well, you get stronger because of that, right? And I think I always view the world through that idea of templates, right? Like, if our value is advocacy, what's the template for advocacy? It's showing up and saying we're going to do what we said we were going to do, and doing it on behalf of other people well.
Yeah.
And we'll say, like, what I can ask you, Kate, like, how do you model accountability? How do you model integrity?
Yeah.
How do you model resilience?
Yeah.
And because your template as the big leader of this entire ecosystem is what we're all going to pull from to be able to navigate it. I think that was the moment that you had at our leadership team meeting, was like, oh gosh, everyone, because I think you shared like that people were like, oh, Kate, we're doing this for you. Or like, this, Kate, I want to be well for you. I want to do it for you, Kate. And you were like, wait, hold on there.
Yeah.
But I think it's because you live these templates for us. Even though we have both loved this adaptation of avoidance, like, there was a moment a few weeks ago where you were like, I don't know what your day-to-day looks like, and I need to know to feel better. And I'm like, okay, you're right. I could probably do better about saying, this is what I'm working on today.
Yeah.
And share that up with you.
Yeah.
And so that was your accountability to me, saying, I need to know this a little bit more to feel safer and secure. And then my accountability to you is saying, well, this is how I can do that. So that I also feel safe and secure, because the parallel process, right?
Yeah.
My safety and security in my position and my role relies on your safety and security in me fulfilling the responsibilities of my mission and my role.
Yeah. No, and that moment, that was such a hard moment for me, because like I do take a lot of responsibility for how other people view me. And I have had a lot of really amazing women leaders in my life.
Same.
Who I have, like, my pastor's wife, for example. She's amazing. You remind me a lot of her. And so, like, one of the things that I learned from her is that people have to see you. Like, they have to see the flaws. You cannot be this perfect person on this pedestal. Because
it's a long fall down.
It really is. It really is. You have to show up. You have to show them that you are relatable and that you have character flaws, and you have to be genuine in reflecting those, even to a group of people who may criticize you for it. And so that is what I have tried to do at Inner Circle, is when I am struggling, I let people know that I am struggling, because I'm allowed to struggle and you are allowed to struggle too. I am allowed to have a crazy life and you are allowed to have a crazy life. And at our company, you have permission to be a human. So I hope that that's well reflected. And in that moment that you were just discussing, like, that was a moment of chaos for me, because I felt out of control and I felt like I wasn't showing up well and that I wasn't leading the company well. And I didn't want to broach that, because I avoid things, especially when I'm in that mindset, So I think that if we are able to come across and show people our values and how we can reflect that in our systems, I think that is how we make change, right?
I totally agree, right? If we want to kind of dispel this idea that avoidance is the best way to navigate relations at Inner Circle as employees, as staff, as partners, then we've got to model it.
Yeah.
We've got to walk that walk, and we've got to say, I need a little bit more in this space. And we were texting this conversation, so that's our avoidance pattern showing up. We're just still having a hard conversation. And people, will say, oh, don't have hard conversations by text. Unless that's the only way we're going to have the hard conversation, then you're going to have the hard conversation that way.
I will not have a hard conversation in person.
It's
I could
just
probably
too
do
much.
over the phone. But
right.
yeah.
And you, both of us were kind of like, oh, we've both been sitting here shaking on the other side of this phone right now. And I was like, because I want to show up well for you. And you're like, I want to show up well for you. Yeah. But I think that was a moment in our relationship where trust really grew. Yeah. Because you were vulnerable and I was vulnerable and I was willing to say, maybe here it is. This is what I'm going to own here. Is that maybe you don't feel necessary. I'm going to show up and be more accountable to you because you're accountable to me. Yeah. And so, It's bi-directional accountability. But avoidance gets in the way of that.
It does.
But being able to even talk about it in the way that we're talking about it, like, oh gosh, my avoidance got in the way, Kate.
Yeah.
That's critical to our culture.
Yeah. I think so. Weaving that in to somebody else's culture when that has not been what they have been doing, where do we start? Like, how do we start to change systems? Because it's hard for us, right? Like, it's hard for us. We are constantly navigating it. And then we're going into somebody else's system and learning somebody else's problems and trying to teach them these lessons that we've already navigated. How do we convince them that is something that is right for them?
You know, I think one of the reasons, at the same reason somebody goes in for therapy, right? They need an objective viewpoint to help ground them in reality.
Yeah.
And we are not a part of that day-to-day system. So we have this greater capacity for objectivity to come in and say, this is what we heard. This is what we heard from this phone call that we had with you. This is what we heard in this conversation we had with your board. And this is how we can show up for you. And we do that through our values by attaching our values to their values to say, this is how we can advocate on your behalf. This is how we can build resilience. And if you have this value of accountability, you know, if you're a people-serving organization, we can say, we know how to teach you this, how to live this value, what it looks like in action. But I live from a pretty specific value of every yes is a hell yes.
I love that about you.
Yeah. And so teaching leaders that, well, I don't always say hell yes to them, but, you know, I'm like, you can say a heck yes too. That still works. But the idea is it's a yes.
Yeah.
And that's who we want to work with. The people who say, yes, I see that there are challenges here, and yes, we're willing to do something about it. And yes, we're going to invest in every individual and every client we serve by doing this really important thing.
Yeah.
And is it vulnerable to have somebody come in from the outside and go, oh gosh, this is what we're seeing. This is what we're hearing.
Here's your dirty underwear. We're just going to fling it around for a second and let you watch. And honoring again and normalizing how vulnerable that is. You're going to get tired of me hearing saying the word vulnerable too, but it is vulnerable, right? It is.
How many times have your parents ever said, Kate, could you review us as parents so that we can learn to do better?
Oh my gosh.
Zero, never.
But you know what? I have asked my children that.
That's the generational change, right? How risky is that?
I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but it's risky, and the feedback does help you serve your children better, you know?
Yeah, I'm always of the space of like, let's every family have a mission and vision and value statement for how they want to navigate the world. I wish couples had that for them, but organizations do. They have that naturally built in. I think that's how people can learn from organizations.
Yeah.
But what we often see is that people don't know how.
Yeah.
And it's the same with therapy, right? People don't know how there's a whole therapeutic modality called acceptance and commitment therapy. We have to accept that there's something here to change and commit to changing it. And so, you know, at the organizational level, you know, there's a commitment that comes from the organization that says we're seeing these trends. Yeah. We're seeing a lack of retention. We're seeing hard things being said on these annual surveys. Or, you know, sometimes the inverse is true. All of our annual surveys look really good.
Because you fired everybody? Because everybody quit? Why does nothing looks that good?
Yeah. And maybe again, goes back to anonymity and confidentiality.
Yeah.
And are we really doing that? So when we go in, it is completely confidential. You know, get some interviews from some key informants, get some group interviews from some people so people can feel like they open up, give them opportunities to talk with each other, and then come up with some different themes and share to the bigger group, capturing all that as data, right? These are just data points.
Yeah.
And if you treat them as data, they don't become as painful. This is information for us on how and where we can show up better for our employees. Because it's expensive to lose them. Even if it's just 30% over their salary, which is the kind of 30 to 50% is of that annual salary is that natural kind of investment level for every new employee.
Yeah, it's expensive.
It's expensive, right? So if you're paying somebody $100,000 a year, which is very rare in Oklahoma, let's be clear about that. You know, you're looking at $30,000 to $50,000 just onboarding them.
Yeah.
That's an expensive endeavor.
Yep.
And so how do we keep people?
Yeah.
And how do we grow people into stronger people if they come in not having those templates?
Yeah.
It's how you show up as a leader. And, you know, because of family systems work as a therapist, what I've learned is that your leaders are kind of like your moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles. And if they're at family meals laughing and having a great time and, you know, saying, yeah, we're going to carve out 30 minutes to watch the kids do their play that they just directed and created in the bedroom while all the grown-ups have been alone, and those children feel very seen and very heard and very valued. And I think that those same things apply at the organizational level. And my research kind of pans out that I'm not wrong, that my intuition around that is really kind of sound.
Yeah.
Because you bring all of your history of authority into the workplace every day.
Yeah.
And if you had safe, kind, gentle authority that when you said, Mom, like, I don't want to do this, and your mom said, oh, I understand that you don't want to do that right now. You can do it here, you can do it this way.
Give them a choice.
And you empower them, voice and choice, right? Trauma-informed principle. Then they're able to kind of hear that and make some of their own sound decisions. But that takes a lot of risk for the grown-up.
Yeah.
To be able to say, oh, I'm going to let go of this, do as I say, not as I do, and I'm the authority, and you're going to listen to me. But that comes into the room as for leaders too, right? So we've got all this history that gets often ignored by the systems, and we're saying, let's tackle that history so that you have a better system, because the leaders have their own history, the employees have their own history, and we have to reconcile those histories and to be able to create new templates for how to move forward. Both of us have histories that lead us to be avoidant.
Yes.
Right? Which is probably related in saying something to our grown-ups that might have been a little bit of hard feedback. And we practiced and we rehearsed and we were ready. And then we said to our grown-up this hard thing. And then our grown-up responded with, that's not how this is going to work.
Yeah.
Right? And then we learned very early to just hold that inside of us. And so then when our boss calls us into the meeting, what are we doing? Rehearsing. We're thinking about what we're going to say. We're thinking automatically of how to defend ourselves.
Our heart rate is through the roof.
Our heart rate is through the roof.
We're shaking a little bit.
Right. And then the authority was like, well, you don't have to be afraid of me.
Why?
Well, do you know that every grown-up that I've ever tried to talk to from very young and even now at work, it's been hard, and it still shows up. And all of us, you know, are walking around with our own history of adversity and challenges. And, you know, if you've had interpersonal trauma, that shows up at
really,
work.
who hasn't?
I can count, like, on one hand, the number of people I know that don't.
Yeah. I honestly, I feel like if they don't, I'm not friends with them. I would like to know where these people exist, please.
I can really think of just a handful of people who don't have that history, and I'm envious.
Yeah, also, I kind of feel like this interpersonal trauma, like, creates your personality. It's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like,
absolutely.
you can turn that
That's
into
where
a
resilience
diamond.
blooms.
Yes.
Without adversity, there is no resilience.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on something that you kind of brushed by it earlier. There, and I'm going to butcher this, and I know that I'm going to butcher this, but there is this saying that says something along the lines of, why would I train people if that training empowers them to leave? And the answer is, why would you want to keep them if they are not trained like this? How can we apply that to our systems that we are putting in place? Because our systems are very relational. You got to dive deep. We want to weave our systems into the workplace to make this relational, healthy, functioning system. And that does require a lot of effort. And I think it also requires, like, a multifaceted approach. I always picture it as, like, one of us works from the top down and one of us works from the bottom up, because we have to make this large scale upper leadership change. And we also have to show these people down here that we care about them and they're safe and they're able to give this feedback and, like, don't worry, we hear you. We're working up here, we're working down here. But why would the people down here trust us when we are another authority figure swooping in, telling them what to do? So it's relation, right?
It's relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even in our last discovery call, they said essentially, like, we're doing this because we want to have better relationships with people who stay.
Yeah.
And, I think systems fail people when they don't invest well in people.
Yeah.
And for me, it always comes down, and I think when Colin and I approach this in these discovery calls, like, this impacts your bottom line every day.
Every single
day. Every interaction with every client, every interaction with every peer, every interaction with every leader.
Regardless of field or department.
Regardless, because you're human. Because a human who's doing a human being, as we call them in our family. But being able to really show up that way. And how do we establish that trust? Again, normalize that it's really weird to talk about hard things to somebody you don't know. But we do that in therapy fields every day.
Yep.
By saying, I'm glad you're here. It can be weird to just tell all of your history to a stranger, and we normalize that in informed consent to say, like, sometimes after you leave here, you're going to have a vulnerability hangover. That's what we call it in Inner Circle, after they've come in and poured their hearts out. And I think the same thing happens at organizations, and we have to tell them on the front end, this is what you can expect. A vulnerability hangover on the back end. And when people know what to expect, right, that gives them this capacity for certainty where they can enter with a little bit more of this, like, I know what's going to go on here. I'm tying this to this next week I'm doing something for the first time in my entire life that I've never done before. And I'm going straight from only being on a sailboat once to being in a regatta.
I'm so excited for you.
Yes. I'm scared to death.
Are you
My
really?
level of being terrified is so overwhelmed, right? Why? Because I'm physically vulnerable. I'm emotionally vulnerable. And so just being able to do research on, like, what are the roles on the boat, and being able to ask questions of the leaders in that space, and them normalizing that if I wasn't feeling anxious about this, then I might not be in touch with how scary and overwhelming it literally can be, especially at the beginning, because all the boats are lined up and they're ready to go and they're all taking off at the same time and they're feet apart and everybody's got to know what they're doing and they've got to know. And the only way to stay safe on that boat is if everybody in the team knows what their jobs are, what their responsibilities are, and are committed to following through on that.
What a great parallel.
What a great parallel. And I've learned so much about myself through this whole thing, right? Because I do believe that life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. I mean, this is at the edge of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
But I think, like, being able to normalize it through that lens, like, this is going to push you beyond your comfort zone at the organizational level, having strangers see your dirty underwear.
Yeah.
And if you don't normalize it on the front end, and then you're like, oh, guess what? We had this really hard feedback, and your senior leadership team is really overwhelmed and frustrated and absorbing so much of this, which is true in most systems. Senior leaders are the absorber of the above them and below them, and all people that the people below them are serving. So there's multiple layers. And being able to normalize that that's what happens in most systems for a system that we're working with, there's almost this sigh of, like, okay, this is normal. Thusly, I might be normal in how overwhelmed I am by holding it all.
Yeah. There's not something wrong with me for feeling this way. This episode is brought to you by Inner Circle Mental Health. Inner Circle specializes in confidential, trauma-informed care for first responders, veterans, healthcare professionals, and others working in high-stress roles. But our work doesn't stop at therapy. We partner with departments and organizations to build peer support infrastructure, provide leadership training, and create systems that protect people before crisis hits. If you're an individual looking for support or a leader looking to strengthen your organization, you can learn more at innercirclementalhealth.com. I feel like we're getting close to answering why do good people burn out in good systems. Do you feel like you have an answer?
I think good people burn out in good systems because they're showing up every day. And even if they're rewarded for that via salary or a great fringe package, they're not necessarily feeling it at the relational level.
Yeah.
And it's got to be lived through our values. And I think when there's that mismatch between what your values are and how you're living them as an organization, people burn out because the values aren't being lived in the way that they're being proposed.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think that's exactly it. I think that there is work to be done in these very important systems that people rely on, that sometimes is the difference between life and death for some people. I think that good people can burn out in any system. But even when they're good systems, even when they're good intending systems, I still think that they need help with relationship. And I think that they need help with their values reflecting throughout the organization, from top going down, from bottom going up. And I really feel like if there is a change that we can help people make, I think that this is it. I feel like we could be so valuable in this space.
Right. You know, individual therapy doesn't tackle systems issues. And a lot of people come into therapy, and I've always been surprised at how much of therapy is about work. You know, I thought it would be about themselves and their families and their relationships. But I can spend sessions and sessions and sessions talking about the stress of work with many adults in all sorts of organizations because they're absorbing it, and then they bring it home, and then it shows up. And in responder systems, we've talked about how that shows up at home with, you know, maybe they're cracking in their role as spouse, or cracking in their role as parent, but they're still showing up very well at work. Cracking is happening.
Yep.
And so I think for so long, the impetus of resilience has landed on the shoulders of the individual. And I think what we do is push back against that notion by saying resilience is a relational process. Resilience does not happen in a bubble. Resilience happens in our interactions that we have day to day. It happens when you walk into a hard meeting with your boss who says, this is going to be a hard conversation. And so I want you to we're going to just spend a minute kind of grounding in before we move into this feedback that we've got to share with you openly, because we know you want to show up well in your role, and we want to support you in that. And so even things like discipline can be this process where we're really strengthening the resilience of the relationship that we have and the resilience of the individual. And when leaders understand that they can do the same thing, right, in a different way and get better results, I think that they're willing to be vulnerable enough to say, you know, maybe there's something to this.
Yep.
Maybe I don't have to come down and, you know, like crack heads open to be like, you're going to listen to me, I'm your grown-up. That's too familiar with too many people in our world, especially in Oklahoma, right? I think it's so critical to kind of tie this back to some of the ACEs research, and this is a huge study done, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and most people in responder systems know about it. They've had some training on it. But I imagine that every person that I confront, stranger, you, any human that I meet, probably has some adversity in their background, and it's my responsibility to show up in a way that doesn't make them feel worse, that it's my responsibility to show up in a way that in every interaction that people leave that feeling just a little bit, not good, not better, but safer.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more educated.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more grounded in why we're having this hard conversation. And you know, avoidance comes back to avoidance, right? A lot of times in systems, we just avoid the issues until it's falling. And
till the building is burning down.
And then we're like, why is the building on fire?
I have no idea.
Because nobody knows where the fire extinguishers are, even if they've walked past them in the hallway a million times. Because when you're in the land of overwhelm, you don't see clearly, right?
Yeah.
Like we live in Oklahoma, like if there's a tornado, when do you start fixing the roof? In the middle of the storm? No.
Definitely not in the spring.
No, after the storm is past. But what if we could say there's a way to put a better roof on your house so that when the storms come, they're a little bit stronger? And that's what we do. We prepare people for storms because they're going to happen in any organization. There's going to be, you know, I mean, we can talk about responder suicide, right? Like,
oh my gosh,
the risk after one responder dies by suicide, what the risk for all other responders in that system and in neighboring systems and in systems that hear about it indirectly. The risk goes up.
And the responders who responded to the suicide, their risk goes up too. It is, I talk about responder suicide as a bomb in the community because when one of them goes down, all of them feel it, even if they only met that person once, even if they like maybe ran one call with them. It is, helpers are not supposed to kill themselves. Helpers are supposed to help people. And when a helper is not able to help anymore and chooses suicide, it is the biggest bomb in the responder system. It's a hard one.
It's a hard one. Mm-hmm. And I think we could stay in that space of avoidance and just continue to be like, well, that's a hard thing that happens.
Yep.
Or we can organize and advocate and bring resilience into spaces. We can show up with integrity and do what we say we're going to do, living the values to support that team, to support those peripheral teams, the whole region in that state or in that space, being able to really show up well. But we couldn't do that if we didn't have our own spine of values that we're able to really lean on.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. That's what I hope that we accomplish that. I hope that that's where we end up going.
I think we see it every day, even in discovery calls that don't end in a signed contract. There is some relief that's felt because it's not the dirty, shameful secret anymore.
Yeah.
Somebody else knows that we're having a hard time as a leader, and there's this almost just
somebody heard.
Somebody heard me, and maybe that's enough to take the pressure off.
Yeah.
But I'm going to push back and say, imagine parallel process again. Imagine how good it was for somebody to hear you.
Yeah.
We can let that ripple out throughout your entire organization. I hate that this sometimes feels like sales pitchy.
Yeah, but it's not. That's the thing. It's not.
It's not.
It's supposed to be helpful.
People can learn from this for free.
Yeah.
Like how to do this. We've just given you a framework. Now go live it. But it's not. It's really us highlighting that we're walking this walk.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking the talk.
And we're walking it with people. We are not ever just walking it for them. We're not telling them what they should do.
No.
We don't ever do that.
I think one of my most profound trainings has been done was with you. And the first thing we did at the beginning of that training was that we asked everybody in the room, what do they want to get out of that time together?
I have never been in a training where that has happened before. I thought that was so powerful.
It was so powerful. And so then people were able to share that. And at the end, we went back and we said, did we check all these boxes? And we did. We checked every box because we were able to anchor to the needs of the people in that space and meet them where they're at and not leave them there.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of compassion that we operate from. We meet people where they're at, which is empathy, and compassion is refusing to leave them there. We're going to leave them with something stronger, with something better, even if it's just a tiny nugget of information, even if it's only that they now bought an Owala water bottle because we told them that you drink more when you drink through a straw, because hydration is so critical in all of these fields, right? Like even if that's the only thing they heard, they're better for our time with them.
Yeah.
And again, invest. The return on investment, you will never be mad at it.
Yeah.
Is it a hit on the budget up at the front? Absolutely. Is it a worthwhile hit? Definitely.
Yeah.
Invest in your people. Strengthen the relationships that happen between those teams. Let us model for you what safety looks like in spaces of vulnerability. Let us help you understand how you can show up well for the people. Because at the end of the day, all responders are people, helping people, holding hard stuff for people, and healing people that they're coming into contact with. Just smile on the stranger at a street. Like sometimes they look at you like you're weird, but sometimes they smile back, and the risk is worth it every time. Oh, Kate, you're such an important person. Thank you so much for the vulnerability and talking about our avoidance in front of everybody, because we both acknowledged very early on that was a typical pattern of ours.
Yeah.
And so every time we have a hard call, we're like, look, we did it. We had a hard conversation.
We're so proud of ourselves.
So proud of ourselves, because if we just hold it inside, resentment builds instead of resilience blooming.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't want to operate from a place of resentment toward each other.
Yeah.
Right? I hope we always continue to model accountability
to.
for each other.
I feel like we have to. Like, that's our mission and that's what we're doing. So,
Yeah, we're going to walk the walk.